Ladies and gentlemen, next up is, I had to talk with him this morning after breakfast and realized that he's forgotten more about the Constitution and what's going on in this country than I know, and he's really sharp. So let's everybody give a hand to Mark Kerr.
Thanks, Woody. You guys are on camera. Say hello. That's pretty weak. Hello? One more time. Just a little bit of I love America kind of hello. So now they're talking. So I'm from Washington State, and I brought you guys a box of beer. It's Corona. And I heard from a nurse today that this is the one antidote to the coronavirus, is that if you take one of these per day, and is anybody here a beer drinker? That was weak. Any beer drinkers in here? So if you want an antidote to the coronavirus, come up and get your one-a-day Corona antidote. First one's coming. All right, come on up. They're yours, and then they'll be in the back too. But this guy's pretty bold. I'm going to film him coming up to get his Corona. Give him a big round of applause. He's not afraid of the coronavirus. He's going to get his Corona beer. It's in the front pocket. There you go, right there. Hey, you know what? Hold on, real quick, come back, hold on. So this guy was telling me about the Corona beer is good because it goes with Lyme disease.
No, I said that if the tick thing comes along and the virus is still there, then I guess we'll have a Corona and Lyme.
Nice. Anyway, okay, I know, bad joke, so. All right, so there, I'm gonna stop recording. So I'm from Washington State, the epicenter of the coronavirus, where half of the deaths from the coronavirus have taken place. So which do you guys think is worse, California or Washington State?
Yeah!
They're even! They're brothers and sisters. No. So what am I doing here, and who am I? So I'm the founder of the Center for Self-Governance. We teach political leadership training nationwide. We made a video called Lavoy Dead Man Talking. We're going to show episode 1 after the California Rifle and Pistol Association does their speech later this afternoon. I hope you'll stick around. The videos are for sale, and they help Jeanette with her legal fund. I hope that you'll consider purchasing them, and her books and the t-shirts, and making a donation, because as she stated very well, that her legal battle is your legal battle. Let me explain why. So you guys just played a video about a summer camp for boys. And they said Christian summer camp for boys, teaching Christian leadership skills, right? So, I'm going to connect your summer camp to domestic terrorism. So there's an organization in Washington called Team Rugged, and they hold a summer camp for boys to teach Christian leadership every summer in Stevens County, Washington. These young men that put on the camp are solid Christians, 21, 22, 23-year-olds. They've been to Jeanette's house, helped her build the corrals, right, Jeanette? Jared, Patrick, all these guys. Now they are connected to Washington State Representative Matt Shea. How many of you have heard of Representative Matt Shea? Those of you who haven't heard of Representative Matt Shea, while President Trump was being impeached in the House of Representatives, Washington State Representative Matt Shea was in the process of being impeached in the Washington State Legislature. Now, remember, Team Rugged, a summer camp for Christian boys to teach them Christian leadership skills, is connected to Washington State Representative Matt Shea, who was being impeached at the same time as President Donald Trump was earlier this year. Now, what does Matt Shea have to do with Jeanette Finicum? Washington Representative Matt Shea went to the Malheur Refuge to broker peace to prevent the loss of life. He went on a fact-finding mission with 5 other state representatives, 1 from Oregon, 2 from Idaho, and another from Nevada. Now, what does that have to do with anything? A former FBI agent who lives in Seattle was hired as an investigator by the Democrat Party in coordination with the Republican leadership of the state legislature to investigate Representative Matt Shea's involvement in the Bundy standoff and the Malheur Wildlife Refuge in 2014-2016, respectively. When they put out their report, 108-page report, it said that Representative Matt Shea engaged in domestic terrorism. And they listed Team Rugged in their report as a domestic terror training camp. The Democrats and the media, in collusion with the leadership in the Republican Party, immediately called for Representative Matt Shea's resignation or expulsion. Why is this so important to you regarding your summer camp for Christian boys to teach them Christian leadership down here in Northern California, in the great state of Jefferson, soon to be? That was weak. In the great state of Jefferson. Okay, just checking, Terry. Just checking to make sure they got that fire going. Why is that important to all of you? Is because you all know intuitively that something's wrong with our country. You wouldn't be here if you didn't feel it. Or you'd be making fun of the people who are here if you were the media, which there were some here earlier. But that's okay. Representative Matt Shea was listed by the Democrats and his own established Republican Party in the state of Washington as a domestic terrorist. Donald Trump was listed as a domestic terrorist. The NRA, you're going to hear from them soon. They are listed as a domestic terrorist by San Francisco City Council. Lavoy Finicum was labeled a domestic terrorist by the media and the FBI. The people who are on trial in the Malheur, those who pled guilty, have domestic terrorism attached to their guilty plea, not the charge. It's very important that you all understand something regarding this matter of domestic terrorism and why I'm telling you this story. I started a political leadership training program in 2012 because I was trying to find a different way for people to become engaged or participate in politics. So our organization formed a nonprofit to teach people political leadership skills. Our graduates are the most highly successful political participants in the United States. I'll give you some examples. And this relates directly to Team Rugged, the summer camp for Christian boys to become Christian leaders. So in Idaho, one of our graduates was involved in, how many of you guys are familiar with Eric Parker? Okay, Eric Parker is the sniper in the Bundy standoff. He's the dude who's laying on the concrete. And if you look at the AP News photo, there's a guy on his knees. Everybody else is standing up while he's in the prone position. That person on his knees is me because I'm like, this guy's about to get shot. And I don't mean to make light of it, but I was literally thinking that. All right? So I filmed the Bundy standoff in 2014, not because I was a rancher or I own a lot of land or I understand grazing rights and all these things. I was there because I was going to teach one of my classes in Prescott, Arizona, and it got canceled on Saturday. So April 12th, one of my students from the night before said, hey, let's go to this rally in Bunkerville, Nevada. So I'm there with my camera like I was doing with you, and I had another handheld, and I filmed the Bundy standoff, and I ended up filming Eric Parker, the sniper, and all this other stuff. Made a documentary out of it because the students in my class said, you need to tell people the story of what you saw from your perspective. And the issue is this: was Lavoy Finicum a defender of or a terrorist against the United States? Until we answer that question, until you, the American people, make a conscious choice to answer the definition to that question, your summer training camp, eventually, post-Trump, will be listed or labeled as a domestic terror training camp. Now, not legally. The people who are doing this to us have an intention, and their end goal is to create domestic terrorism code. It does not exist yet. Matt Shea was their attempt to press that matter that we have a white, male, Christian, slave-returning, systematic racism problem. And their goal is to create domestic terrorism code. Now, I'm going to give you the proof. So, just 2 weeks ago, a House resolution was introduced in Congress asking the State Department to list 3 foreign white nationalist groups as an international international terrorist organization. Now, why is that important? You should be very interested. I can't make you interested, but I'm trying through these films and through our political leadership training program to teach people the game that they are playing with you is bigger than whatever issue you're facing with government, whether it's excessive regulation in California, taxes, the watershed thing, what's the little guppy here, the little, what's it called? The Delta Schmelt, right? Okay. They just asked the State Department to list 3 white supremacist foreign organizations as international terrorist organizations. Now, why is that important? The reason that's important is because if you become labeled a white supremacist like Lavoy Finicum, or Representative Matt Shea, or Team Rugged, the Christian Boys Leadership Summer Camp, and they can connect you in any way, shape, or form to one of those now listed, not yet, they're planning on it, now listed white supremacist foreign organizations. They can label you a domestic terrorist in the United States, not by the media or not as a supplemental charge in your pleading for guilty in the Malheur. No, they can actually classify you as a domestic terrorist. Now, in Lavoy's case, he was not a domestic terrorist. They called him a domestic terrorist. There's a big difference between being called a domestic terrorist and legally being a domestic terrorist. Representative Matt Shea has not been expelled, and he has not been charged as a domestic terrorist. They simply used a retired FBI agent in order to craft a report that the Democrats could point to saying, we have a white supremacy domestic terrorism problem. Now, why is that important? So, the United States is a 7-boundary republic. And it was created by white, male, Christian, slave owners. And I'm not saying that I agree with that 100%. What I'm saying is the people doing this to you, that is what they believe. And so anytime you say liberty, freedom, constitution, states' rights, return to liberty, take back our freedom, stand, etc., what does your enemy think? What does your enemy say? And what does your enemy do? They coordinate in Congress last year between March and April of 2019. In Congress, in a committee called the Terrorism Committee. And in that committee, the counterterrorism FBI agent assistant McClarity was asked by Congresswoman AOC. I was going to let that sink in for a second. She asked Counterterrorism Assistant Director McClarity the following question: why is there no charge for domestic terrorism and white supremacy? Anybody know what his answer was? Now you have to understand, the FBI in 2016 is the same FBI that falsified a FISA application in order to get a surveillance from a court against Carter Page, an aide to President Trump, well, candidate Trump at the time. This is the same FBI that manipulated a national security threat assessment in order to activate the Oregon State Police to shoot Lavoy Finicum in the back 3 times. It's the exact same year at the exact same time. So it's a very important question, as much as you dislike AOC. Why and what was his answer? His answer is, there is no charge for domestic terrorism for people who are not connected to internationally designated terrorist organizations. So Matt Shea, Lavoy Finicum, and Team Rugged in Washington State have one thing in common. They have all been labeled white supremacists, and they have all been labeled domestic terrorists. And why are they being labeled white supremacists and domestic terrorists? Because they support a 7-boundary republic created by what they believe racists. And so all of their activities in the courtroom, I observed Judge Sullivan coordinating with the Department of Justice attorney, coordinating together in order to label Lavoy not a white supremacist, because they can't make that stick because the evidence isn't there. But in that courtroom, in an oral argument, labeled him a domestic terrorist. So I just want to end by saying this to everybody. Yes, you need to take a stand, but it matters how you stand. And your enemy does not think the same way you do. They don't speak the same language you do. And if I'm challenging you all from the bottom of my heart. I've been doing this for 10 years, studying Republic, studying political participation, and studying our enemy and how they think. They do not think or speak the same way we do in this room today. And if you want to defeat them, you must understand how they think, how they play, and what they say. What they are planning is nothing compared to what they did to Lavoy Finicum. Their objective within the next 5 to 10 years is domestic terrorism code. They're working on it, even as Trump is the president of the United States. And so the coronavirus, the coronavirus, in my personal, and now I would say political science professional opinion, is this. It is a political attempt to crash the United States of America, because it was created by because the people who are doing this to you believe that the United States is systemically racist and the ends justify the means. What they did to try to impeach Trump without due process is the exact same thing they did to Lavoy Finicum without due process. What I watched in the courtroom with Jeanette just last week, between Judge Sullivan and the Department of Justice female attorney, in their coordination with each other, was to prevent the evidence to come out that Lavoy was murdered. But you all intuitively know that. But you have to tell your family members who are Democrats that he's not a domestic terrorist. So you end up having to argue that he wasn't reaching for a gun. Well, if the evidence came out, you would find out that someone planted the gun. The FBI medic who touched his body said there was no gun. Lavoy was shot out 6 times before he was shot in the back 3 times. His hands were in the air when he was shot at twice by an FBI agent. You would know that there was no probable cause to stop this group of people invited by law enforcement to law enforcement in a meeting with over 300 people. You would find out that the worst crime they committed was trespassing on federal property. You would find out that the national security assessment had been falsified by Dan Love in the Bundy standoff and transferred to his good buddy Greg Bretzing of the FBI, who used that falsified threat assessment to convince the Oregon State Police they had a domestic terrorist. The media labeled Lavoy Finicum and his friends, his co-protesters, over 17,000 times in a 24-day period. You ready? Labeled patriot, constitutionalist, white supremacist, bigoted, right-wing, extreme right, far right, hate group, anti-government, reject federal authority, militia, etc. All of those labels are listed in the federal lexicon called the Domestic Homeland Security Extremism Lexicon. It was created under the Obama administration and purposely designed to separate those of you who support the United States and state Constitution of California as white supremacist, right-wing extremists, so that they could marshal the federal resources to surveil you through the NSA, through the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, etc. Now, there's a solution to this. That's the key. This sounds crazy. And we've been talking to people in Congress about this, and they kind of look at me like we're crazy. But now, I don't think they think we're crazy anymore, now that President Trump has been labeled a white supremacist, a domestic terrorist, and a right-wing extremist, and a nationalist, and everything else under the sun. And of course, now they react because it affects them. Right? The FISA court is going to get reformed because it affects them personally when they run for office. But they don't. The thing that troubles me the most is that the FISA court was abused in order to put bugs in the Finicum home. How come that is lesser and Carter Page is greater? When does it become the governed and the governing become equal to each other? Separate but equal? When does that have relevance again? So when all of you decide to take a stand, I hope that you will consider our political leadership training program before you take your stand, because it matters how you stand. Jeanette's probably going to meet with the special assistant to the President of the United States within the next month or two, depending on how far this hysterical coronavirus pandemic extends. And I hope that you guys will seriously, prayerfully consider two things, and I'll wrap up. Take our political leadership training program. I'll do it for free. I only ask one thing, is that you will consider changing your political paradigm, not your political party, your political paradigm, so you can compete with the people who are doing this to you. Competitive. Who's not competitive in here? I'm talking this, are you guys competitive? Yeah. That was weak, huh, Jeanette? Are you guys competitive? Yeah. You can compete with these people, but you have to know how they think and what their strategies and tactics are. Our organization has spent 10 years studying them. We know how they think, we know what they say, and we know when they're doing it. Right, Jeanette? We knew that they were going to put out a hit piece on Lavoy Finicum 3 months before they put the hit piece out on him. We put a statement out 1 month before they put the hit piece out on Lavoy, and they had to change their story. They had to change the narrative. And now we have exposed that hit piece for the fraud that it was. In advance, that's called political chess. We checkmated that person in the media. Now their piece is debunked because they lied and tried to say that Lavoy was an extremist, and at his heart he wanted to die a suicide martyr's death in order to get most of you guys to go be martyrs too. BS. It was BS. It's because their agenda is understood now. We know how they think, we know what they say, and we know when they're going to do it. You want to learn to be competitive with those people? Then please, prayerfully, carefully consider our political leadership training program. Second, And most importantly, would you please finance Jeanette's wrongful death lawsuit even after Judge Sullivan declares a dismissal? It's imperative that you don't stop fighting, that your stand is not based on what you see, because faith doesn't come by sight. It comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. God speaks in your heart, and if you listen to that voice, it may not end well for you, but it will end well for liberty. So please prayerfully consider our leadership training program, Jeanette's financing her wrongful death suit, even past Judge Sullivan's faulty dismissal decision, which will come. But the struggle doesn't end there, does it? Don't be demoralized by what you see on the surface. Be encouraged by the small, still voice in your heart and spirit. And I want to thank Woody and his wife for having us, and all of you for staying.